Cameron, are you ready for this episode?
Yes, I am. I need to get my eye patch on here.
Every time we talk pirate metrics, somebody is always saying that we need to wear an eye patch while we talk about it. And like, I don't know if podcasting is the right medium for that, but obviously everybody, we're wearing our eye patches right now. I've got my little plastic Halloween sword that I'm holding here that I've kept since the 4th grade, and Cameron is over there with a Jolly Roger floating high in the Carlson Center.
There we are. There we are. We're ready to talk, sales funnel and converting customers.
Well, and with that, welcome to Zero to Traction, a podcast about how first-time founders create companies that scale. As you no doubt have discovered by now, your regular co-hosts are back at you. I'm JDM, aka Josh David Miller, here with my good buddy Cameron Law. Cam, how are you?
I'm doing well. I see what you did there. I'm doing quite well, and good to be back on the pirate ship with you.
Yeah, we're gonna be sailing into the rough and choppy seas of bad funnels. Cass is going to take us on a tour de force. It's going to take us on the 7 seas here, and we're gonna make a few startups walk the plank. Not gonna lie about that. There's going to be some pillaging and some other general raucous behavior in addition that we are calling the Fix This Funnel edition of the Zero to Traction podcast. We're going to talk about pirate metrics, but we're going to do something a little fun. We are going to, sorry, that's not even right. That wasn't even the title of the episode.
Gotcha.
I knew it was F's. It's not the Fix This Funnel edition. It's the Funnel Fail Makeover edition of Zero to Traction. There we go. The Funnel Fail Makeover edition. And yes, where we are in our own particular idiom, Cass is going to give us a broken funnel, some real world startup journey that's leaking users faster than a boat made of pitch decks. And we are going to attempt to redesign that in real time. But before we get to that, before we get to some of these funnels, I think we should probably talk about parametrics a little bit, because there's 2 groups of people here. There's probably one group of people who are like, oh God, they're talking about parametrics again. And I don't think we've ever talked about them on the show before. At least we never spent any time on them. What?
I said, are we talking about it again?
Wait. Jesus. We're just going to put that back in the treasure chest and put it aside for a minute. I don't think we were really talking about. So like one group is probably like, oh, Josh and Cameron are talking about pirate metrics again, because we do talk about them a lot. There's probably another group saying, what the fuck are all these pirate puns about? Like, what are these people talking about? And so we should probably explain that pirate metrics is an acronym. It's an initialism or an acronym, depending on how you choose to say it. But it stands for acquisition, activation, revenue, retention, referral, AARRR, or mateys, the pirate metric. The pirate metric. It sounds silly. We didn't coin it, but the basic premise, the basic idea of the pirate metrics is it's a series of not individual metrics, but buckets of metrics that you can use to describe any business. Any business is described by metrics that fit into those categories. From Walmart to your startup, anyone you can describe in those 3 things. And to do the quick tour de force here of the individual metrics, we've got, people have to become aware of your startup. Then once they're aware of your startup, then they somehow end up in your ecosystem. You acquire them. Once you've acquired them, then they have to start getting value from you. They're signaling activation, that maybe they're signing up for freemium. Maybe they're getting on your mailing list. They use the feature for the first time. There's something that they've done to get value out of it. They've activated. And once it's activated, you need to get them to pay you. That's revenue. That's the obvious one. Then once you get money from them, you want to keep getting money from them. That's retention. And then while they're retaining, they're so happy that they should be referring their friends along the way. So acquisition, activation, revenue, retention, referral, those are the series of metrics. There's one that I gave in the little spiel there that I did not put in the acronym either times, and that is awareness, right? So it could be AAARRR. And the awareness one is not super useful for startups. If you're a startup out there saying like, oh, we're engaged in this activity for awareness, Stop what you're doing right now. You're going to waste all of your money and all of your time, and you're never going to get anywhere. Awareness is not something startups do. It's Walmart and McDonald's can work on awareness. You can't work on awareness. We're going to set awareness aside. We're never going to mention it again. And with that, anything you want to add to pirate metrics?
Yeah, I think
we talk about what it is, but
yeah, I think one of the like context to like think about it is, as you're thinking about your startup and kind of your business model, think of them as like different levers to pull. So you might be doing really well in one, I guess, element of the pirate metrics, or this like customer factory is another way that it could be positioned. And so it's like, oh, we're doing really well in activating our customers. We're creating that value, but we're realizing there's a huge drop off in getting them to actually pay for it. And so then you can start to run experiments to kind of pull that lever. Is it based on price point? Is it on the model in which you're trying to monetize it? And so then you can structure ways to then, get that throughput, which is ultimately the goal, which ties to traction, right? Your throughput is really the core traction of customers going through this process, and ultimately then leading to more customers and more revenue for your venture. And so, part of it, I think the context of the like title of this is the leakiness. So where are they falling out in relation to this factory or this funnel, and how might you then pull that lever to then increase that metric to ultimately drive more throughput for your venture?
Yeah, that's actually thanks for calling it out, because it's a really important thing for startups to think about. It's really easy to start thinking about any kind of metric, but the pirate metrics specifically as a way to measure past performance, which is true, right? Like that's what they do. If it's something you've measured, it's telling you about what happened yesterday. And we've talked a lot about leading indicators and lagging indicators, and there are ways to use pirate metrics to be leading indicators for future success, right? Mm-hmm. That's the way of like not measuring retention before you have customers to retain, that kind of thing. But there's another really important factor or the use case for any of these metrics is that you could think about them as levers, right? If you it's something that you can actually do to make your company better, as you can look at any of these sets of metrics and you can say like, which one, if I were to improve this one number, like which one of them would have the greatest impact on the overall, throughput or flow or whatever. And I've written about that on my blog before. So shall we dive in?
Let's dive in. Let's see what Cass has for scenarios for us.
All right, Cass, what do you got, my friends? All right, so this is how Cass is teeing us up. Funnel fail number 1. We're getting solid. Oh, actually, we didn't. I don't think we really actually said what we're doing here. So we're actually going to. They're going to give us a broken Cass. They're going to give us a broken funnel, and we are going to figure out how we can redesign that in real time. So we're going to talk about how it works, how it doesn't work, and then how we can redesign in real time. So funnel fail number 1. We're getting solid traffic from paid ads, but barely anyone is signing up. And Cass's commentary is, so you're basically paying strangers to ignore you. Adorable. Cameron, Josh, where's the bottleneck? What's broken? And what's your first move to fix it? Your turn. Make it functional. Make it fabulous.
Well, go for it.
I was just going to repeat it.
Okay.
We're getting solid traffic from paid ads, but barely anyone is signing up.
Got it. So it sounds like we're getting good acquisition, but the activation element of it is quite low. And so, I think there's a variety of things, like maybe the positioning of the value prop that's been positioned through the lead magnet or the ad isn't aligned with what you're offering. And so maybe there's a set of experiments to like set up what kind of the value proposition is. Maybe there's not a clear call to action, or that call to action isn't really the value that they had believed they were ultimately clicking through to engage in. So those are kind of the first thoughts that came to mind, was that kind of acquisition to activation. What about you, fellow captain of the pirate ship, JDM?
I do think that's one of the things that came to mind for me, for sure. I'd put it in 3 buckets. There's like the mechanics part of this, mm-hmm. There's a messaging part of this, and then there's like the core value proposition part of this. So like the mechanics of this, I think, is what you were alluding to at the end there, is Like they land on this page, is there a call to action that's clear? Like is it just a problem with the page that like they land and they don't know what to do? And think about like no sign up button at all, or it's not clear. No, you go to a page at the top of the fold, right up the top in the hero is a call to action to do what you want them to do, and that call to action is repeated throughout the page, right? So there's some mechanics there that if you get them wrong will certainly impact conversion. That's not usually the problem in an early stage startup because those things have an effect, but they usually aren't the determiner. But if it's not even clear what the call to action is, that probably will actually kill it. So there's that. That's the mechanic side. The messaging side is I think what your main point was, correct me if I'm wrong, which was that like there's just no payoff. So like you wrote a check on the ad that your landing page didn't cache. And so you're talking about all, this kind of message with this kind of pain to this kind of person, then you land on this like generic landing page. I see that all the time with startups where they're like, well, let's just land the ad on our homepage. Well, the homepage for a lot of startups, because they're trying to figure out their customer and everything, is pretty generic. And the ad was really specific. And so the ad resonated, and then they land on this page that's generic, and they're like, this doesn't seem for me, and they bounce. Even though there is a clear call to action, they didn't get the payoff in the messaging. Right. So like the best practice for any kind of advertising really is to have the landing page tied directly to the campaign itself. So you can use the same messaging, same imagery, same colors, same tone, all of that stuff. So that's the second one. So we have the mechanics and with the messaging. And the third one is the one that is like the biggest problem and the hardest thing to fix, which is maybe your value problem didn't resonate at all. And so there's like two big kinds of ads that you can run. You can run problem-based ads and solution-based ads. And so like a problem-based ad is one where you're testing for problem resonance and people are opting into, I have this problem. Oh, maybe they got a solution to this. This is interesting. And so they click on that. If they do that and then they land on your page where it starts talking about the solution, it's possible this solution didn't hit. So that's good news because the problem did, right? So now you can just, again, fall in love with the problem, not the solution. Now we can, find a different way, take a step back, capture some of those people who have the problem, do some customer interviews, figure out what the value that they're looking to have created for them is, and then pivot on the solution side of it, right? If you do a solution-based ad and you have the value prop, pretty well defined, and then you flip over to the landing page, you should have that payoff there. And if you don't, then it's probably again that middle option that I mentioned where you just have payoff, like a messaging problem.
Yeah. I think I know we've probably tried to stay away these days because we talk about experimenting so much, but the experiment mentality is so crucial when you're starting to look at the pirate metrics, and kind of particularly in this example, right, was if you are running an experiment where you're setting up a problem, based ad versus a solution based one, right, you can see the, basically the metric that you're trying to hit and where you are right or wrong. And so, really trying to connect some of these dots is having that specificity, and not just like, oh, I'm running this ad and seeing, like there's not that many people clicking through, or that they're clicking through and not signing up. You can having that specificity allows you to then take a decision from that learning and seeing how you want to do something different. And so it allows you to kind of actually pull the right lever versus saying, oh, well, it looks like the ad didn't work because no one signed up. Well, it was like, actually, your ad worked. It was something wrong with wherever they were going. And was it one of those three things that you just kind of walk through, whether it was like it didn't mirror in terms of problem solution, or the messaging didn't quite resonate and have the payoff, or something was just poor of the UI UX, so that they didn't actually see where the call to action was.
Totally. All right. Should we move on?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, Cass, just getting warmed up, baby. Hit us. What you got? All right. Cass likes the energy. Let's keep the renovation train rolling with your next tragic yet fixable funnel. Funnel fail number 2. People sign up, but then ghost us. 0 activity after account creation. Cass's little commentary here. Congrats, you built a startup that collects email addresses like Pokemon cards and does nothing with them. You've got a haunted user graveyard. All right.
You take this one first and I'll follow up.
All right. People sign up, but then ghost us. 0 activity after account creation. So this is where, like, okay, so we had acquisition, but we don't have any activation in the true sense. Like once somebody actually does create an account, that they're not actually extracting any value out of it at that point.
Mhm.
And there are, I think, like there's a couple of different categories of things that fit here. I think one of them is the one that most people will immediately run to, which is a UX problem of some kind.
Mhm.
And so I'm going to come back to that in just a second, because that's a whole big bucket that I could rant about all day. But the other bucket that I think is the easier one to talk about and the harder one to fix is that people liked the value proposition that you created and that really resonated with them and they signed up. But once they see how exactly you went about creating that value, it stopped resonating. And this is actually really common because usually, particularly in the early stages, the language that you use around your value proposition is not really feature specific. And it probably shouldn't be, right? And so when you try to convert somebody on that, and that starts to resonate, like I always talk about there's this difference between what value you're creating and how that value is created and delivered. And there's a lot of different ways to create the same value. And so one of the really common things that just sort of stays buried here, unless you do some custom interviews, and this is where rapid prototyping can really help. What can often happen is that the what value they like, the how you're creating it, they don't.
Mhm.
And so now it's just like you have a fundamental problem in the product. I'll pause there. We'll come back to the UX stuff.
I have
in a
a
second.
kind of follow-up question, just because like oftentimes, I mentioned the example of, or like the context of, people buy like benefits, but they don't buy features. So say they were like ultimately drawn by, hey, here's the value I can get out of it, here's the end outcome, but then you're saying the like feature didn't align with how they want to receive that value. Is that what you're kind of sharing there?
Yeah, exactly. So like, actually, you may remember this. I won't name names here, but you'll know
Yeah,
who
I
I'm
think I
talking
know where
about.
you're
So
going. So yeah, like integrating data or something like you have to
oh,
do
actually, that
some
wasn't
like.
worse
Oh,
because I'm going to consider that a UX problem.
okay,
So I'm going to come back to that in just a second. Although
okay,
I guess it's actually maybe it's in the gray area, but I think it's easier to talk about in the context of UX.
okay.
No, another one. This one was from like I don't know, from 6 months or so ago. We had one of the teams that was competing in the startup challenge and in the traction side, and they had this software product that was already in market, and they were targeting like it was B2B, and they were targeting like these smaller players. And when they had gone through the process of doing the value proposition canvas, they discovered, oh shit, that does not like
Well,
all the lists match up, but the order doesn't. And so what's really important to them, to our customers, is not really like prominent in our software. And so what you've actually done is and like the UX version of this would be the button that they use most common is the button that's hardest to find. Right? Like that's the UX version of that. But oftentimes, particularly when you're talking about an early product where there's not just tons of features, it's not just buried, it's really more fundamental than that. And that the way that you went about creating the value just did not land with people, but they still want the value. And that requires oftentimes recreating, maybe not the back of the product, but the front of the product. And again, it's not a UX problem. Right. I mean, it is if you if you broaden UX pretty expansively, but like in the sense of did you create the value that they wanted? The answer is no. And it's not because of a bad design. It's because that design did not take into consideration the actual motivations of the person who was using it. And so the value is just created in sort of a wrong way. Right. Does that help?
yeah,
Does it make
yeah. No,
more sense? Like
thanks for
where I'm going
sharing the
for that?
example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The UX one. So the one that you were coming to mind, which actually came to mind too when I was talking about the UX side. So let's pivot over to UX maybe. Is UX is I have some background in UX, which is why I could like rant all day about this. Also, UX is one of those things that like I am the guy who will stop using products because of bad UX. And I'm not saying like, oh, MVP with the blah blah blah. No, I mean like if you're just committing errors, you get on my shit list, and then you have to walk the plank because this is just not. Nope. But back to this. See, I already got distracted. The basic idea of the UX problem is that like the value's there and the value is created in the right way, but the user experience is just terrible. And a lot of times people say, oh, that's an MVP problem. It's not. It's not, right? The V stands for viable, right? And so like an MVP is not viable if your customers all think it's shit and won't use it because they think it's shit. It wasn't viable. The problem wasn't an MVP. It was that you had a minimum product, but it wasn't a minimum viable one, right? And different audiences react very differently to those things. And so some audiences are going to feel very differently about those early problems, which is why if you're attacking a really severe and really urgent problem, people will deal with some UX problems. Like I've been that early adopter more than once. Probably lots of times where I'm using a product that I'm hoping that they will figure this shit out eventually, but because the core needs solve something for me, that I'm willing to put up with that stuff. And it doesn't always pan out. Like I'm an early adopter. I know that sometimes that doesn't pan out, but I'm willing to put up with it because the value that they're creating outweighs the inconvenience of those little UX things. So that product is viable, even though it's not, livable or whatever it is that people want to replace MVP with. So like there's that UX sense, but there's another UX sense in which that and this is the example that Cameron, you alluded to before, or at least I think it was. If not, we'll throw yours in there as well. But this is where it's not a plug and play thing, right? Where in this particular example is they needed all their data. It was a B2B thing and they had to get all their data into the system in order for it to be worthwhile. It's some analytics, it's a business intelligence tool. And so at that point, when you first log in, it's as empty as the airwaves were there. There's nothing. And so and you can put little things there all you want and say, okay, first step is to import your data, but now they're going to have to go and import their data. And so if this is, this can be something that's simple, or it can be something that's extraordinarily complicated. In some cases, particularly early days when you're just getting started, with an MVP, it might be instructions to tell them to go to the other system and download CSV files that they then can upload here, right? And that's really inconvenient. And so you can get that UX problem right away when somebody just signs up, and it's not because the product's broken or something wrong with it. They actually never get that far. And so to go back to the funnel fail is zero activity after account creation. That's why, because as soon as they were there was just this massive barrier to entry of having, and it's I'll do it later. Right. And a really good signal in the market is whether or not they don't. Right. So if you get a group of people who just don't I can't wait. I'm gonna, it's a lot of work, but I'm going to go do it. That's an awesome market signal to have, right? Because there's some real pain there. But in the case that there's not, then you have to decide this is a pivot or persevere moment. And the persevere version of this is going to be well, can we build an integration? And is that too big of a lift? That's too big of a lift. Can we do concierge, right? So in the short term, can we just offer to import their data for them? And by doing that, we can validate if we solve that problem, which is technically solvable, but it's expensive and it's time consuming. If we solve that problem, will the rest of this work? Let's just concierge it and find out. The riskiest assumption isn't can we build this integration? The riskiest assumption is that if we build the integration, are they still going to walk away?
Right. Yeah, I think the word that comes to mind is the inertia, what inertia might be pushing against your customer when they're, getting into that process. So for that last example, if there's no specific step-by-step process, then it's they're fighting to get the value because they have to do X, Y, and Z steps. And so is there then ways for you to remove some of that inertia where, the value proposition was strong to sign up for the account, but then to overcome the pushes against them, are they going to continue to fight to see that additional value, or does it diminish over time? Because they have to do more work to get that value than maybe that value originally seemed to them.
I like that. The metaphor of inertia. That's a good one. All right, Cass, that was a fun one. We're fired up, but let's crank this thing up to 11.
Ooh.
All right.
This is we're no longer taking on ships. We're trying to take on an island or something here.
Cass says cranking it to 11. Okay, here's one straight out of the how is this still happening in 2025 folder. All right, here we go. Funnel fail number 3. We have great retention. People stay logged in forever, but they're not using the product at all. Cass says, so your product's a glorified browser tab. Maybe throw in a lo-fi hip-hop stream and call it a vibe. You've done better work there, Cass, but that's all right. We'll let that one slide.
That was that wasn't an 11 energy, at least from
no, like there's kind of a mismatch there.
That's okay.
All right. But funnel fail number 3, we have great retention. People stay logged in forever, but they're not using the product at all. All right. What's the startup telling themselves? What's the real issue? How do we get these zombie logins into like value feeding humans?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, well, I'm trying to think through like what value are they getting by staying logged in. I'm trying to think of a use case where I stay logged in into something but don't actually activate, and find the value in it. So yeah, I'm wondering if maybe they're finding value elsewhere, or what you're providing, in a free sense is, sufficient, but the main core value proposition you're trying to drive, is somewhere else. This one's got me a little thinking through. I'd be curious of your thoughts, Josh.
Well, I think it's this one is like they did dial it up to 11 because this one's actually kind of hard.
Yeah.
Right. But the first thing that comes to mind for me is a lack of urgency. So like this was maybe it's a free trial or a freemium thing. And so they didn't actually have to put in the credit card, and they signed up and they have intention of coming back to it. So they leave it open, right? Like I'm going to come to this, but it's not problem number 1 on my list. Let me go take care of problem one on my list, but I'm going to come back to that. And so then they just have this, like what I often call like the slow startup suicide, right? Where you get all this, like what seems like really great acquisition, but no activation. So that's the kind of thing, like that there's no urgency, therefore no action is how I'm thinking about that. I think some of the things that might come to mind for me is like the old vitamin versus painkiller. So you've given them a great vitamin and they have good intentions. They're going to take the vitamin, but they've got some pain to work on. And so we're going to solve the pain first. And so there's a couple of different things that we could do. So one is to test that, like customer interviews are going to help you test this. Like you should have caught this before you were in market, but you didn't, and that's real world. And hey, here we are. No sense dwelling on the past. You could try simple things. You can try onboarding nudges, right? You could try little setup checklists, or try a triggering event, right, of our own. Like we always say, Cameron, you always talk about like the triggering event that causes people to look for a solution, right? Well, we can do sort of the same thing inside the product, where we can give them a triggering event. Like let's say I mentioned like free trial or freemium, right? So the difference between the two is that one expires.
Right.
So what happens if we put a clock on it? What happens if we create some urgency?
Yeah.
Does that move it up their priority list? So that might be something that's worth exploring with that. It could be an activation thing, very similar to what we were talking about before. Maybe they log in and they get to this like blank page. And so one of the things that there's a thing in UX that we call empty states. Empty as in, like an empty cup, empty states. And an empty state is when you have think of a list of something and the list is empty. Like, what do you show when the list is empty? And so what most people will do out of the box is they'll just say, you have no items in your to-do list, right? But the smart ones don't do that. The smart ones have an empty state that calls you to put something in the list, right? And so like, this is where you have no items in your to-do list, create one now. And it takes up a lot of space. It's not just like one line in the row. It's actually like the full screen of where that table would go, trying to get them to create it, or trying to give them hints or tips or tricks to figure out how to create that thing. The flip side of that from a UX perspective is also like, let's say it's a list of not good things. So not like a to-do list. Maybe it's a list of problems that you need to fix, things to take care of. It might say congratulations in the empty state, and that gives that little bit of delight, right? And so you go back to the experience side, assuaging fears. This is an opportunity to use empty states to reinforce that. But that's not an activation thing. That's just on the other side. I just wanted to kind of close the loop on empty states. So those are a few things that come to mind.
Yeah, I'd be curious of your thoughts on like, is there ever like a sense of you're coming in and there's just too much to do, So like they're overburdened by the features and not sure where to start. And so then they just they come back like, oh, maybe I'll check this thing out. And then they don't actually end up engaging in any of it because they're just overwhelmed by like feature creep, for lack of a better term. Like the core like value they came to set in, which would have been just one or two elements, now is kind of lost amidst like, oh, I didn't know that this thing did that. But then like, oh, I got to learn more how to find and use that particular thing. So,
Yeah,
I mean,
I totally agree.
Yeah, I think that, like the one like where I think we've chatted about a little bit already with the prior examples, but it's some of that onboarding as well was like you said, the like was it zero state? Is that what the term?
Empty
state. Yeah. And getting them to take that action and find that value right off the get-go. And I like the idea of creating that, manufacturing some urgency, so then you can kind of see what that looks like and gets them to move in the space. So Cass did get us cranked it up to 11 on us, I think.
He did. Yeah. Like, that was a good one. Kind of tough, but let's do one more, Cass. What do you got? Cass says, oh, you want one more? Let's make this finale messy, stressful, and full of misplaced optimism, just like a real startup funnel. So, final fail number 4. People love the product, use it regularly, tell us it's awesome, but won't pay for it. The Cass says, oh no, honey, you've built a product people love as long as it's free. Welcome to the SaaS Friend Zone. Broken heart emoji. So how do we turn this free tier forever funnel into something fundable, Cameron?
Yeah, it's a good one. I think, part of it is, did you give away too much value for free from the get-go, and like that you've already satisfied, and then like you're like, in order to do that, you just have to turn on them paying. So instead of using a freemium model where they have to then opt into additional features where they're already getting the value, you might have to then just say, okay, like we're moving from a free to a cost, now you have to pay for this value, which is obviously a challenging thing to do. And then, part of it is going back to maybe some of them and seeing, is there additional value they're seeking? But I think that that's a challenging space to certainly be in. So would be curious of your thoughts, Josh.
Yeah, I think my first thought was the same as yours. Are we just giving, who buys the cow when you get the milk for free? I think is what the kind of thing my dad used to say. But I don't think he was talking about startup funnels, but it applies.
I don't know where you're getting free milk, but that's cool.
Right. I don't think he was talking about milk either. I'm pretty sure this was a sexual thing. And I can tell by the look on your face right now, which I wish the audience could see, that you actually have no idea what I'm talking about there. And so I'm going to choose not to explain it, so that when eventually you meet my dad, he's trying to put the pieces all together.
All right.
Okay. Anyway, so, but yeah, that was the first thing that came to mind, was like, just have we defined the tiers poorly? That might be something. Another thing could be that it's just not a big enough problem for them, and so like they get value out of it, but not enough to offset the pain of the fee of whatever that fee is. And it's the exact same calculation that you make anytime you're considering change, right? As the therapists would say, everything stays the same until the pain of change is less than the pain of staying the same, right? Or until the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change, I think is the more elegant way to put it. But either way, it's like you have to, like the adoption, the barrier to adoption has to be easier to overcome than the pain of staying the same. And so if the pain is not equal to the dollar amount that you're attempting to charge, like that it just could be that signal there too. It could also be pricing tiers. So it might not be quite as simple as, did you give it all away for free? It might be that the actual, the tiers, like if you have multiple pricing plans, they could just be poorly clustered. So one of the things that you do oftentimes when you have a large user base and you're trying to figure out what the right pricing model is, right? Because whatever you have at the start is wrong, right? It's going to be wrong. We know that. It's not about getting it right in the start. It's about proving that there's sufficient value to charge people money. So once you start getting a lot of users, one of the things you do is cluster analysis, where you start looking at all the behavioral analytics data that you have and saying what kinds of users are doing what kinds of things, and then you can start to cluster them in these groups, and that's how you end up defining the features. And then there's some strategy in there to try to maximize revenue by let's put the cutoff here and put this over there. So it might just be that you actually just define the tiers strangely so that they feel like I have to jump into a much bigger tier than I'm in now, right? So let's say you had a free tier and then went from free to $50 a month.
Yeah.
That's a big jump.
Yeah.
And so that might actually indicate here's a couple of ideas. So one idea would be to get rid of the free tier entirely and charge $10 a month for what used to be the free tier, and then have 10 and 50, and that might be better, right? Or 10 and maybe, because you don't have the economics of the free tier anymore, maybe it's actually only 10 and 30 at that point, which now starts just to make a lot of sense. Or maybe it's let's decrease the free tier, add in a mid tier, right? So that way we don't have to jump as far. So those are some of the other things that came to mind there as well.
Love it. No, I think that those are great. And I think that's not an atypical spot for founders to find themselves in, particularly as they're just trying to demonstrate traction and not necessarily have it always be revenue. So it's like, oh, I gave away too much value and now I have to charge them, which makes it a little more challenging.
Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have on Zero to Traction for this week. It was longer than our average lately, but certainly not a record for us. So thanks for spending this time with me. But it wouldn't be Zero to Traction without some frivolous thoughts. So Cass, you want to start? You got a frivolous thought to share? All right. Let's wrap this up with a frivolous thought worthy of your beautifully structured funnels. And here it goes. If you microwave a burrito at 2 a.m. and no one is around to hear the beep, are you still making good life choices? I'm going to ask Cass a more targeted question, because while technically that is a frivolous thought. All right, well, that lowered the bar for us. And the answer is no. Microwaving a burrito at 2 a.m., I'm questioning your life choices. I'm just going to answer that question.
Maybe you just got back from the startup challenge.
I mean, we feed you.
Well, maybe.
Hey, these are not universal truths. All right. There are exceptions to every rule.
Got it.
All right. Do you have a frivolous thought to share?
I guess I'll go down the line of the Kings saga. So we're nearing the end. I think there might be 5 games left. They play again this evening as of our recording, but they just beat the Cavaliers and then had a win the game before that. And so they're now in 9th place, I think tied for 9th with the 10th place. So they're technically in the play-in game. So I think hopefully they can just start to get some momentum headed into what would feasibly be the playing games into the playoffs. So as long as I think we stay healthy and keep that momentum, this could be a good playoff berth for the Kings, and would be exciting to see. But they lost to the worst team in the East Coast Conference, and then they beat the best team in the Eastern Conference. So who knows what to expect, but nonetheless, I'm excited to see them play on Wednesday, and particularly see who walks away as the Kings capitalize winner for 2025. So,
yeah, hopefully it's a good game. I'm going to be there too.
You will.
My what? Am
I
not invited? Can I not go to a
No,
Kings
I said
game and cheer on our Portcos?
Yes, Portcos.
Yes, that's right. So, my frivolous thought is actually, I was going to say it's really frivolous, but it actually ties into what we were talking about. So as I mentioned a long time ago on this show, I think, as one of my frivolous thoughts, that I'm reading The Lord of the Rings, and I'm still in the middle of the Two Towers. And it's just one of those things, like, I don't have a lot of leisure time, to spend in solo reading, right? Like, some of that leisure time, the little that I have, I choose to spend, like, with my wife. And so, uh, anyway, like, the time that I have for that reading is, like, in bed at night. I like to read before I go to bed, and I'm often really tired and it's hard, but get a few minutes in bed reading, and it's nice. Well, the problem is, like, I think, like, book lights are all really bright, and so I don't like them very much. And I don't want my wife always goes to sleep before I do, and so, like, that's that I don't want to wake her up either. And so I'm like, what do I do? Like, for this? So I'm like, I'm going to check out. Maybe it's worth spending the $10 for the Kindle edition so I can read it on my Kindle Paperwhite, right? And or on my phone. And while I was looking at it, I don't know what the price was, because I saw that it was on Kindle Unlimited, which is their, like, it's like Amazon Prime, but for the Kindles, they have access to a series of books, and this was one of the books that you'd get access to with your Kindle Unlimited, and they gave a 3-month free trial. So I have signed up for the free trial that I'll probably never end up paying for, and then for 3 months, so that I can attempt to finish this on my Kindle, and then, of course, finish up with The Return of the King, the third book in the trilogy, before the 3 months ends. But there you go. I've tied it all back to the funnel.
Premiums all the way down.
It's free all the way down. All right, with that, we're over time here. We're late for another meeting, but thank you guys so much for listening. Time is one resource you can never get back. Really appreciate you spending 40 minutes with us here today in your ears, and hope to see you next time. Grab a founder friend, somebody who's interested in business, interested in entrepreneurship, or got a startup, and tell them, hey, you got to listen to Zero to Traction. Really helps us out. Leave us a review, like, subscribe wherever you like, and subscribe. Cameron, thanks
Thank
again.
you.
This was fun.
Always a fun time.
And always a fun time. And thank you, Cass. And with that, bye.
Bye.